this invitation. It's a privilege. I think it's also very nice that we try to use the technologies that we're talking about in order to communicate. So it is time to connect not only the preaching with the practice, as it were. I'd like to thank Franco, Maria Francesca, and Nicole for the support. I mean, all this is they're doing. I'm just the messenger. The talk today, of this webinar, concerns basically two topics. One, hyperhistory, and the other one is infraethics. Now, this would be much easier if we could show to the group the slides that I have prepared. I'm not sure whether we are ready to do that. If you can let me know whether the slides are visible, then we can carry on.
Yeah, we're trying. Sorry, it's just we have a bit of a problem with uploading slides. So if you can, Luciana, I'm very sorry. Just continue and we'll try to make it happen once you talk.
Okay. I'm afraid it would be much easier for the whole group if we had some. In the meanwhile, I can also try something else. By the way, I can try to share my screen and pop up the slides. But I see the slides coming up, so maybe we are lucky enough. And if you get full screen, slides are. So if you can, I hope you can see the slides. So I'm trying to navigate through the slides. So hopefully everybody is on the first slide, the introductory one. Some confirmation will be welcome from people in the group. Yes. If you can see the, let's see if I can progress to the next page. So these are the three topics, and I hope you can see the outline in front of you that I would like to discuss today with the group. The hyperhistory is basically a framework within which I will then try to explain what I mean by infraethics. So the following slides are divided into three groups. What I mean by hyperhistory, what infraethics is within the hyperhistorical framework, and why it matters today to have a discussion about infraethics within our hyperhistorical framework. All this will be explained in the next 20 minutes or so. So the first thing to have in front of you, and again, I hope that you can see the slide where entitled "The Framework from History to Hyperhistory." In this slide, excellent, thank you. As long as I see a few of you saying yes, I can carry on. So here you can see why we need a bit of a visualization. You probably know this is just a reminder. In a textbook, you will find that historians talk about prehistory whenever a society, humanity, does not have any way of recording information for future consumption. That normally means writing, but it could be anything else. It could be some symbols, it could be pictures. So basically a society which does not have so-called ICT, information or communication technologies. Now that happened, at least on this side of the world, about 6,000 years ago. We moved from prehistory to history with the invention of writing. Within history, and that's the center of the picture, you have the individual and social well-being start being connected with ICTs. Think of the Roman Empire, think of the British Empire, or any large organization. Now, the suggestion that I want to make is that at a certain point, the individual and social well-being not only are connected with ICTs, but they start depending on ICT. Simple way of understanding this is to think of cyber war or information conflicts. A society that depends so heavily on information technology is also a society that can be attacked in terms of its infrastructure. So we move from prehistory, no ICTs, to history, a time where ICTs are a bundle with any other technology, to a time where we have begun to depend heavily on ICTs as a way of improving our individual and social well-being. Now, within that framework, and we should be moving now to the next slide, hopefully. Yes. We have a political problem. Now, the political problem is summarized in the next slide, number 6. Again, I hope you can see it. We've been used to so-called Westphalian system of national states. 1648, Europe just finished the, sort of ended what you may consider World War Zero, and there was a need for reorganizing power in this continent. So what we basically ended up with is a new system of political order, which to a large extent is still with us. It's what gave rise to what we consider national states, like France, then later on Germany, or Britain, Spain, and so forth. Now, that particular system is organized around physical boundaries, where the physical and legal space overlap, and there are sovereign powers which control those physical and legal space. Now, the control is, of course, is through physical force. We have recently moved to some kind of post-Westphalian order. This has happened after the Second World War. We've been with some sort of a magmatic post-Westphalian order for the past few decades, but globalization has put a lot of pressure on that. It's a wider phenomenon. It means empowering other entities, not necessarily state organizations, like huge corporations, influential NGOs, other social movements like the Occupy movement. And it's part of the dialectic between economic versus social control of politics. Now, this is the scenario we have in the background. Now, within that scenario, what you get is basically the following picture. Again, it is an oversimplification. We used to have nation states. By the way, looking at the writings, we, as Europeans, during the colonization of the rest of the world, we imposed that model on other nations, even nations or countries or societies which did not have that model. So we used to have nation states. The UN is called, United Nations, is based on that idea. They were the information agents, the post-Westphalian perspective. Now, if you move a little bit higher on the nation states as relying on information and communication technologies, they became information societies. That's the second block. Move right, and information societies later on became increasingly global, which meant that last block in the middle, they were facing, or they started facing, global challenges, which at the same time required big political agents. To simplify, big problems are big solutions, big agents that can bring about those big solutions. Meanwhile, top of the slide, the information societies inevitably empowered some multi-agent systems, MAS, which are based on information. Information technology inevitably ends up by giving power to other people. The point becomes that information multi-agent societies become part of the new political agents, which are also trying to solve the global challenges that you find in the middle right-hand side of the picture. The social apoptosis, to explain, comes from biology, and it refers to the natural process through which cells come to an end of their life in order to make other cells grow and in a healthy system. So what nation states in a way did by adopting ICTs and transforming themselves into information societies was to make possible other multi-agent systems equally based on information technologies that are at least coming together with, if not replacing sometimes, states as the source of potential solutions. Now, again, quickly moving forward because time is ticking. Here's a quick series of points for discussion. Nation states become information societies which empower a variety of new multi-agent systems which in their turn transform centralized government into more distributed governance. In that context, you do not find a so-called end of history. More on this, if you like, during the discussion time, but what I would like to describe as hyperhistory, sort of a super historical movement. Modern politics was based on sovereign states, the Westphalian system, and universal human rights, sort of called Enlightenment. These two, as it were, foundation stones become insufficient. The question that we are facing, and I know I'm putting it rather philosophically, but I hope that from the Cyprus and the Greek crisis to the financial problems in the world, you can see where this is going to lead. One of the problems we are facing is how we're going to design the right multi-agent systems, including but not only sovereign states. This, for example, in Europe means what kind of European Union we want to see in the future. Now, all this could have been said in just one slide, the slide that you have in front of you. The multi-agent systems are constituted by rules or norms. Think of the European Union. Norms are some kind of goal-oriented, as we say in philosophy, teleological, goal-oriented agents. So the question becomes, how can we design the right sort of norms, agents, multi-agent systems that can deal with the global problems we are facing in the information society today? If you think that this is way too theoretical, consider the following problem. There's no way we can solve environmental issues, that's just an issue, unless we design the right multi-agent systems that can coordinate their actions in order to solve the problem. Each of us, we are now 27, turning off one light this evening will not make a difference unless their effort is coordinated and sees as a multi-agent systems that can take care of the bigger issue. Now that is, roughly speaking, the hyper-historical perspective. You do not have to agree with me, and I see lots of comments already on the chat. I'm just trying to provide some points of reference, which we then may discuss in the second half of this webinar. So what about issues and problems inside this general framework? Well, one thing, and that's the second half of the talk, that I like to introduce is this idea of infraethics. Again, it's a rather simple idea, and I hope is helpful to identify some issues and therefore start moving towards solutions. If you think of, let's go back to the library, the physical library, and if you think of an introductory textbook to ethics, you pick up the 101 Ethics for Beginners from the library. If it is a book published, let's say, in the late 80s, early 90s, you will find that a lot of contemporary issues are not really discussed. And I have a list there, crucial concepts or phenomena which have emerged in the last decade or so as vital for our contemporary society, and are ethical issues. Security, trust, transparency, neutrality, control, rule of law, privacy. Now, this and many others are rather peculiar features of our society. It's not very easy to put them on the ethical map, deciding what sort of problems they are, in which, using the analogy, in which chapter of the introduction to ethics we should place them. And I would like to argue that is because they are not intrinsically morally good or morally evil, but they are morally loaded or morally relevant. And that's the idea of the infraethics that I like to introduce. We could talk of normatively dependent concept. That's something that I take from Rainer Forrest, or concepts, phenomena, think of privacy, if nothing else, dependent on a wider theory of justice to gain substantive normative content, think of toleration or tolerance. Or we could just borrow from philosophy of technology, a classic distinction. These are dual nature concepts and phenomena. They cut both ways. Think of, for example, trust. Trust, we normally take it to be something positive, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, you could have trust in a Nazi society, in a mafia organization, and that would be perfectly fine in terms of concept. I see that we are having some reshuffling of the webinar. I'll wait for a moment.
It's okay, you can go.
Is everybody okay with the reshuffling? I'm not quite sure what has happened.
Go ahead.
So we were here. I hope you can all see. Okay, so I hope you can see the slide entitled "The Place of Infraethics." So what the point that I'm making, I think, I hope, is sufficiently intuitive. These concepts, from trust to privacy, for example, they have positive and negative effects. They have advantages or disadvantages, potential benefits. They can harm or actually improve the receiver of the action. In this case, could be the society or the environment or an individual. So if we move to the next slide, on again, the place of infraethics. The difference that I want to draw is that infraethics is the ethical infrastructure that facilitates or hinders agents, actions, or system states, particular configurations of your environment. So they are kind of the conditions that are behind the moral action. They enable, empower, or stop, constrain agents and their choices, their actions and their consequences, the states of the environment and their developments, which then are morally good or evil. So the distinction here could be summarized in the following way. You have ethics on the one hand, which is so-called axiological, contains values. It tells you what's right and what's wrong, what's good or morally evil. And then you have an infraethics, which is anaxiological, forgive me, which means that provides the rules that then can convey or facilitate the values provided by the ethics. So imagine the following simple toy example. Think of water and pipes. The best water, the cleanest water, would be useless without the right pipes, and the right pipes would be useless unless you have water. So ethics is the water, and the infraethics is the pipes. Now, for a long, long time, at least in a philosophy department, we've been concerned about ethics mainly, if not only, and my suggestion is that we should be considering the infraethics, the pipes, as well. So this is what I mean by infraethics. Why does it matter? Well, here is the logical order in which we could basically organize our ethical and infraethical work. And getting in this right means avoiding a serious risk of confusion. First, you do some ethical work. This is a logical order. Now, think of chicken and egg. That's the kind of order that we're talking about. The two things then start getting one feeding into the other. But we need to know what ought to be, what ought to be done, and what should not be done. So basically, your values. So you do some, then 1.1, some axiological work about the right states of the environment, what you like to see happening, what you do not like to see happening to your world. Now, it could be a social environment, it could be a physical environment, it could be just a constructed environment like your city and so on. Then there's some normative work, 1.2, about the right processes that can lead to the realization of the right states. What would bring that particular state into reality? Now, this is, as I said, one chapter in the whole book. The second chapter is the infraethical work. We now start thinking about what are the facilitators or the obstructors that can promote the implementation of the right processes leading to the right states. So think of this in terms of 3 steps. You have a final configuration of the system that you like to achieve. You know that those processes will lead to that configuration, and therefore you need to identify what are the conditions that make the processes able to create those final conditions. Now, this in economics, for example, is a piece of cake. We know that. That's what we hear on the news all the time when the government says we should invest more in infrastructure. Now, think of that. Infrastructure is not necessarily the business, is what facilitates the business. Without infrastructure, no good business, no good economy. At a certain point, however, building infrastructure becomes part of the economy. So this is the sort of idea that I like to put on the table for the discussion. Within a hyper-historical context where societies depend more and more heavily on information and communication technologies, we have global problems, global agents. We need to design those global agents. One way, among many others, of considering how we design these global agents is to start thinking in terms of what are the obstacles we need to remove, the obstacles that we need to put in place so that the design of those multi-agent systems leads to the right design of the environment we want to see being developed. So, conclusion, and we're coming to the end. That's the last slide. You can look at governance, and that's one more element in the whole debate, as the design, the management, the maintenance of this infra-ethical framework. Think of the pipes for a social system which is coordination complex. The social system we're talking about is a system where everybody has to be on the same page in order for the problems to be solvable. So what you get is good governance as efficient governance. Efficient here doesn't mean sort of business efficient or some kind of political simplified view of means and ends. It really refers, if I may, to the value that governance can add to the design of the right agents and infrastructure. So what you get is good governance as governance that facilitates the realization of the morally good states of the system to which it applies. Again, with the pipe and water analogy, think of governance as good maintenance of the right pipes. Then the water will flow and it will be clean if we can take care of the pipes carefully enough. It's not up to the government to tell what goes through the pipes, but it is up to the government, through governance, to make sure that what goes through the pipes is the right kind of stuff and keeps being clean and flowing properly. Now, I hope that sort of ideas apart, the technology was sufficiently friendly to allow everybody to follow. Then we now